Well, portfolios will be reshuffled within Prime Minister Modi's Council of Ministers over this weekend with a swearing-in ceremony which will take place at 10 a.m. this Sunday as per Newswire reports. Honestly, no one really knows for sure who the new ministers will be and which portfolios they will be allotted. Not that it has stopped anyone really, and especially in the media, from speculating and guessing. So here's a disclaimer. We do not know for sure which new ministers will be sworn in and what portfolios they will get. But what we're going to talk to you about today is why it's important. The excitement of what could possibly be the last cabinet reshuffle before the general elections in 2019 is building because people want to know what this reshuffle means, why it is significant, and at the end of the day, what these new ministers or the same ministers in different roles will do for the economy. Also, what the rejig would indicate would be the priority areas for this government in the 18-odd remaining months of its term. So let's talk about what this government needs to do for the rest of the term, what that would mean for the economy as well as its political significance, because a large part of this exercise will also be aimed at getting the BJP battle ready before 2019. To talk about this today, we're joined with Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya. He's managing editor of the Business Standard. Mr. Rajiv Gowda is joining us. He is Rajya Sabha MP from the Congress Party. G. Chokalingam is the founder of Economics Research and Advisory. And of course, we have R. Jagannathan, editorial director of Swaraj. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Gentlemen, first I will start with Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya. What do you hope to see from this reshuffle, rejig, and really how significant is it with 18 months odd left to go for this government?
Well, this is going to be a very significant reshuffle in my view, because this is the reshuffle that will take this government to the elections that will be held most probably in 2019. So whatever form, whatever reshuffle, the ministerial changes that happen will probably see through the remaining months of the term of this government. So it is very significant. Number two, this comes at a time when the political imperatives of this reshuffle are also very important because it has got some new partners, and they need to accommodate those new partners, particularly from JDU, and also to make sure that the reshuffle will be probably, I'm seeing it to be to help the government to meet the exigencies of post-election outcomes. In a sense that if the coalition politics will have to be kept in mind, so they have to keep the coalition partners, the JDU, which is joining the NDA now, AIDMK, which is already part of it. They have a couple of ministries, but they need to get better representation. So both from the political point of view, as well as from the economic governance point of view, these elections become very important. From economic governance point of view, I see clearly that there are some ministers who are overburdened. There is at least one minister which has got 4 ministries, which is Mr. Narendra Tomar. There is one minister, Mr. Harshavardhan, which has got 3 ministries. There is Mr. Jaitley, which has got 3 ministries, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Defense. There is also Smriti Irani, who has got 2 ministries. And then, of course, you have got Suresh Prabhu, who unfortunately has seen several railway accidents in the last few weeks. And the expectation perhaps is that you will see a new railway minister and Mr. Prabhu will be given a different berth.
I've always wondered about that. I've always wondered about that because there is no rule per se which says that a minister can't have more than one ministry. And we also have a government which started out talking about minimum government, maximum governance. And I will take that actually to Mr. Jagannathan. Don't you think a case then builds here to sort of have more efficiencies in how these are run? And would that really be the focus at this point, 3.5 years into the term of this government?
Yes, it's rather late in the day to be thinking of having ministries that are more focused. I think it should have been done probably in 2014. Some attempt was made when coal, renewable energies and all brought together and those kind of things. But I think lots of ministries actually don't need to exist. They can be, like, for example, one idea that's been doing the rounds is that there should be a large Ministry of Transportation, which will include surface transport, and at some point it could include civil aviation. You can have a lot more ministers at the junior minister level who can actually look at specific, say, detail. Like you can have a MOS for civil aviation, MOS for roads, MOS for other things. But you need to have, today transport is no longer one single thing. It's multimodal, whether it's cargo, even people. I mean, people travel by bus and then go to the thing. So you need to provide integrated solutions. So only if you have a ministry that looks at transport from a holistic perspective, will you get optimum solutions. Don't forget, one ministry is losing traffic to the other. I mean, at the higher end, railways are losing traffic to civil aviation, and at the bottom end, cargo is shifting to roadways in shorter hauls. So I think a ministry that is able to look at all three together will actually be able to bring synergies which can actually work. So these are the kinds of things that the one good thing that has happened is that the railway budget has been abolished, but now there is need to bring in omnibus transport ministries, and so with many other things. I think it's high time, if better late than never, but it should have been done 3 years ago.
Okay, let me take this to Mr. Rajiv Gowda, and of course, from you will speak from a political perspective, I understand that. But economically, what do you think should be the priorities for this government at this point? And let's jog back a bit to what they have promised as of 2014. There were promises of skill development, there were promises of jobs, there was promises of reducing inflation, on which a lot of work has been done. But what, according to you, should be the focus?
Well, you hit upon one of the key factors, which is the economy, and there the central issue is jobs. Now, we hear rumors that Rajiv Pratap Rudy, in charge of skill development, is resigning. Is he resigning because he has not been able to deliver at all? In which case, one dimension of this government's agenda, which was to use the skill development ministry to do that skill in India and to help make in India and employ more people, looks like that whole agenda has been a failure, and that resignation will point to that. You also had a variety of numbers coming out in the last couple of days. One was about the actual damage unleashed by demonetization, but more than anything else, yesterday we saw the GDP growth figures, and they show the country in a prolonged slump. And manufacturing especially, the private sector is in terrible shape. So there, we actually need the government to step up and find ways to re-inject some kind of momentum back in the larger economy. And that, I hear that Nirmala Sitharaman may possibly leave and move to a party spokesperson role. So how is some new minister going to show up and in the next few months try and do a variety of things that they have not been able to accomplish over the last 2/3 of their term? So again, Mr. Jaitley has been doubling up as a part-time finance guy, part-time defense guy. These are not part-time jobs. So basically, we've seen this government, I think maybe they right away, right up front, they decided that there was no point even in being a minister. The real power was all held by the PMO, which induced a different kind of PMO paralysis in the larger governance and decision making, etc. And that demonetization, of course, reflecting that. And now a lot of this exercise is, I don't see how they're going to turn the economy around. I don't see how they're going to meet his promise of creating jobs when actually CMIE shows that in the first quarter of this year, calendar year, we lost 1.5 million jobs. So this is going to be a cosmetic exercise. There's talk about inducting people like from the ADMK. That ADMK ministry needs to go and do a floor test to see whether it can even survive out there, right? So there's a lot of lack of legitimacy in the larger exercise. JDU, again, a party that's joining the ministry, which the mandate in Bihar was exactly against them doing anything of that sort. So this is just a very, very wasted exercise. Is meant to distract us from the misgovernance maximum misgovernance that we've seen over the last few years.
Okay. Mr. Gowda, of course, they're putting in those political statements, but the key over here, Mr. G. Chokkalingam, is what are we looking to expect from this government in the last 18 months? And let's be fair, there is a mix here of a political plan as well as an economic plan, because this government also needs to show people that it has done work going into 2019. What would be the priority areas in your view that this government needs to showcase or push, or at least display a push towards?
Definitely, areas where the government has to do a lot of work before going to election within 20 months time frame. Growth being clear low. The most importantly, the manufacturing sector has grown at just 1.2% in Q1 as compared to over 10% last year. And second, the fiscal balance, it is getting slightly area of concern. Already for the period of April to July, we have seen the actual fiscal deficit for the 4 month period goes to annual target. And third area is employment. The last 2 decades, the telecom, IT, pharma, they created income, employment and wealth. But unfortunately, for various global reasons and other reasons, these 3 sectors have underperformed a lot. In fact, a couple of days back, we saw that top IT companies, they have reduced the staff strength by about 3,000 in June quarter sequentially. This is happening for the first time. And telecom is going through tough time. Pharma, for the first time, many pharma companies have shown losses or solid degrowth. IT sector in rupee term also, it's growing its revenue in the poor single digit. So unfortunately, all these 3 areas of growth, fiscal balance and employment problem, they have started converging. So therefore, it is not only for the stock market, even for the people of the country. I think the 20 months period is very crucial to improve the performance in these 3 areas by the present government.
Okay, and in fact, those are some important points Mr. Chokkalingam has raised. And let's quickly go through what are the pressure points for the government at this point. Remember, we're sitting at about 3.5 years. We are now beginning the move towards what is going to be a build-up at 2019 and falling growth, like some of our panelists have talked about, GDP figures. That is one pressure point. Sluggishness in manufacturing, lack of jobs or as many jobs as has been promised. Of course, the government has shifted the focus to self-employment and creating smaller businesses instead of actual jobs in the formal sector. Mounting bad loans, there is an effort to deal with that NPA stress. Will it start showing closer towards 2019? Healthcare, and we've put that in because even though the whole very unfortunate incident in Gorakhpur took on huge political overtones, but it is a reflection of a big problem we have in the country, and perhaps that will be one push area. So starting from those pressure points, Mr. Bhattacharya, what really effectively can this cabinet reshuffle do? And that's why I'm not going into the caste equations and how they're going to prepare for Karnataka elections and etc. Dharmendra Pradhan's possible elevation because of Odisha and all of those things which are being talked about. What is it really going to mean for the Indian economy and Indians? What can this reshuffle achieve to improve people's lives effectively, possibly in the next 18 months?
Well, I think I will take off from where Mr. Jagannathan left. One is, of course, there is a lot of scope for merger of ministries. Not only transportation, but also, let's say there are 3 cabinet ministers which are all related to industry. You have got a heavy industries ministry, you have got a medium and small grain industry ministry, you've got a steel ministry. These are all could be merged into one. So one is streamlining the economic ministries and streamlining the transportation ministries, streamlining the energy sector ministries into one and give it a sharper focus. That is one. The second point, I think one of the failures of this government in the last 3 years that one has seen is that it has not been able to give a credible face and a convincing ministerial representative at the social infrastructure areas. We can't even quickly recall who is our health minister. We don't even know who is our irrigation minister, who is our rural development minister. Even actually agriculture minister, has done some work, but he is still not that strong and high profile. While I take note of the fact that this ministry does suffer from lack of talent, But I think the absence of credible faces, important faces, talented ministers to take charge of social infrastructure ministries is actually something that this government can do at this point in time, particularly when you are saying that this reshuffle is actually going to prepare the government in the run-up to the election in 2019. Now, these are the areas where in rural development, you need to have a minister who is actually much more focused. In agriculture, you need to do a lot of work because, after all, jobs are not going to be easy to be created in the manufacturing sector, given the state of the manufacturing sector growth and the industrial growth figures right now. So you need to create animal husbandry sector a proper kind of a job resource. So therefore, I do feel that this is an opportunity to at least get some young, energetic ministers in charge of these social infrastructure areas so that the government's governance standards as well as political goal of meeting and living up to the challenges of 2019 can be met.
You know, Mr. Bhattacharya, you're talking about most people don't even know the names of some of the ministers or Minister of State. That is a fact. And I'm sitting with his entire 6-page list of 72 members of that Council of Ministers because we don't know what changes will be made. At this point, I also want to tell people tuning into this Facebook Live to please send in your comments and questions, if any. We're waiting to read them and get our panelists to talk about any queries that you have or anything that you want to point out as part of this discussion. What real effective change will it make? And Mr. Bhattacharya points out that focusing on the social welfare sector will be key in view of 2019. But let's talk about the big macroeconomic indicators as well, Mr. Jagannathan, because there needs to be a push there, or at least a visible push there, even though its impact might not show by 2019. And do you think that will be a priority or that will recede? Because right now the focus may be on possible political gains.
You see, when you look at macroeconomic indicators, actually the overall picture is benign, except for two key areas. One is growth, and the other thing is related to job creation. So those are the two things that the government really needs to focus on, because the inflation situation is benign, and also the fiscal situation is actually okay. There's nothing drastically wrong with it. I think interest rates, if the Reserve Bank were a little more sensible, should have come down a little bit. It would have given a leg up to investment, even though that will take some time. I think the fundamental problem that this government has delayed addressing is the one with banks. Okay, we knew in 2014 that banks are struggling. They have got an increasing load of bad loans. And if for 3.5 years you have not fixed it, and only now we are talking about insolvency proceedings and a resolution and all that, that means that it will take another 12 months to start cleaning up the bank balance sheets and recapitalize them.
No, I'm just going to get Mr. Rajiv Gowda on that point, Mr. Jagannathan. Rajiv Gowda, do you agree what Jagannathan is saying? He's saying that the macroeconomic indications are largely benign, apart from a couple of problems there. It's not such a big problem like senior members of your party and you yourself are making it out to be.
No. You're misunderstanding what he's saying. He's saying that the conditions, inflation is low, the oil prices are low, all those things are benign. But the basic situation in the country is terrible because of the government's mismanagement of the economy. Demonetization was one, the inability to address what we call the twin balance sheet problems of the banks, etc. This whole NPA problem has not been resolved early enough, and as a result, you now have a huge overhang of bad debt, which is not going to be fixable in the next 18 months or so. So basically, banks are not lending, industry is not borrowing and investing, so that growth that needs to come from the private sector is not going to happen in any great hurry. And when we talk about the smaller industries, the small, medium, micro entrepreneurs who you want to suddenly get charged up, well, many of them have shut shop after demonetization or have been affected by GST's implementation. So it's not going to be an easy turnaround around. And the point, Raj, that I understand what Jagi's point making is that when everything is otherwise good, how could this government screw up so badly? And on that note, I do have to leave. There's one more show I need to go.
Okay, okay, Mr. Gowda, if I can ask you one last question before you go. And in a role of constructive opposition, you're saying that it's a mess and demonetization and other factors have made it worse, and this is the government's doing. What would you suggest that they do at this point to then fix it?
Well, I think one thing that the government can do is give a fiscal stimulus. And, you know, if you noticed over the last 3 years, whenever oil prices went down, they would jack up the excise duties and rake in more revenue. Now, some of that, if it had been in your pocket and mine, in the, with lower oil prices, petrol and diesel prices, would have given, a different kind of a boost to the economy. So that's something that, I'm not the finance minister, but basically that is something that I have suggested to him in passing. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Gowda, for speaking with us. But we still have our other panelists on with us, and we'll try and understand a little more from them what they hope to see from this reshuffle. Mr. Chokkalingam, what could you really say should be the key moves they make? Because at the end of the day, there are, of course, political reasons for moving one minister to the other. It is also being touted as a sort of a report card where performers will get better ministries, those who didn't perform will be moved out, maybe some for party work, etc., etc. We don't know what it will look like till those announcements are actually made. But apart from that rejig, do you think that that message that this Prime Minister, awards or rewards those who perform and penalizes those who don't, is the kind of right message which needs to be heard at this point?
I completely agree with you. That is what the country needs now. Beyond that, you have some issues on the border. On the other hand, as I highlighted earlier, you have so many macroeconomic issues. So this is a time you need strong hand to handle independently defense and finance. So that should be the area of the concern, and I hope the Prime Minister takes it up immediately now. The second, as you mentioned, yes, there are 3-4 central ministers who are very aggressive, and a lot of us know them by department, the ministry. But as other colleague on the panelist said, other ministers are not visible. So this is a time for the Prime Minister to penalize such people, bring on board, very efficient people, because the economy, is really going through tough time. I won't blame the government, because I believe it's a global factor and also inherited. Even the current conditions caused by demonetization also led to these, problems. So it's a combination of various factors which have led to a severe problem in terms of industrial economy stagnating for last 2 years and fiscal balance shooting up. So therefore, to put this in a dynamic mode, the whole industrial economy, this is a time to keep powerful independent minister for finance and also independent minister for defense, and then get a dynamic ministers, to push the growth. Already the government has increased the capital expenditures by 28% in the current year for the first 4 months. So that kind of aggressive measures should be taken up more and more. Then only you can see some turnaround in the industrial economy. Otherwise, we will have a serious problem in terms of growth and employment and fiscal conditions.
Okay, Mr. Bhattacharya, this refrain that there's so many ministers who are invisible, and like Mr. Chokkalingam said, that they should be penalized for it. Is it really their fault that they're invisible? Because remember, in 2014, we started in a situation where there was commentary that perhaps bench strength might be a challenge for this government in terms of experienced hands. And is that kind of what we saw playing out?
Yes, it's a long time for that handicap to be overcome. But if in 3 years you haven't really found out new talent, it's a poor comment on the government and the party, in my view. And please remember that very few cabinet ministers actually give enough scope for work to their junior ministers. That has been the tradition in the Congress era. And one is seeing it being repeated even now, that a junior minister hardly gets a kind of, kinds of a profile or kinds of responsibilities by which they can actually grow up to be a senior minister at some point. The only thing that we have seen, which is a positive in this ministry in the last 3 years, is that you have got a few ministers of state in charge, with independent charge, who have actually done some work, and their work probably will get recognized in this reshuffle. But having said that, let me say that if one has to look at what are the three crucial things that this reshuffle should answer, in my view, one is you need to resolve the dilemma over whether you want the same minister to look at defense and finance. Both are very important ministries. Defense ministry is very critical for your Make in India project, because all the manufacturing projects that are coming up and being set up are all in the defense sector. So therefore, you need tremendous focused ministerial stewardship in the defense ministry. The second area would be the railways, because the railways is another area which is, again, a lot of investments are going to happen. So therefore, you need a proper, supervision there. Suresh Prabhu had promised a lot, but for somehow the ground level action is not yet seen. Maybe it is too early to see some action from the railway ministry's point of view. One doesn't know. And the third area is the textile ministry, which is again an area which can create jobs and which can actually revive and tackle both the jobs as well as India's foreign trade issue, which is exports. So therefore, I am for one looking at these three answers, that in this reshuffle, whenever it happens, maybe on Sunday, that what happens to defense, what happens to railways, and what happens to textiles. Okay. Because even now you have got a Smriti Irani who's looking after both ministries, which is probably, she may not be giving enough, paying enough attention to both the ministries. So these are the three areas that I would look forward to.
All right, and out of two of them, we have some indications with Arun Jaitley being quoted as saying at an award function recently, when asked about, will he give up one of the ministries, saying, I hope I won't be doing both for some time. Suresh Prabhu, of course, offered to quit and he was told to wait. Probably he has to wait just another couple of days. I've refrained from this so far, but now as we wind up towards the end of this conversation, since I have two very senior journalists with me, so I'll start with Jagannathan. What are your bets? What have you heard, and what do you think? Which ministries and ministers do you think will be moved around?
Well, I think it seems likely that Suresh Prabhu will be moved to a different ministry, though no specific purpose will be served by him moving him just when he's sunk his teeth into railways, and there might be some small turnarounds happening. We know we saw the railway accidents, but the point is there is the other things that need to be fixed, and he started fixing them, created the station development project, many things he started. So these things, if you start moving ministers who are doing well before they actually deliver, it's not a good idea. But in any case, if he gets a good enough ministry to sink his teeth on, he will do well there as well. I think Gadkari is due for a promotion. His problem is he's stuck with a terrible Land Acquisition Act, which is actually a growth-destroying act. If you actually see, the big problem there is that even national highways haven't gone to the level that he would have liked, because land acquisition costs are just shot through the roof. You can't have infrastructure development with that kind of land costs. From less than 1 crore a hectare, it's now more than 2 crores. It doesn't make sense. So this law has to be changed. The other thing is I see some changes. Probably, I've heard a lot of things, but I don't want to speculate on that. I wish Mr. Modi actually takes this opportunity to induct some lateral experts from outside the party. You don't need to have only party hacks doing critical jobs. There is no reason why you cannot have a very good minister in agriculture. I mean, if you can get somebody like an M.S. Swaminathan or an Ashok Gulati to be even a junior minister there and tell them that, look, I want you to fix this problem in the next 1 year, they can actually do it because they know the issues. The problem is you should not rely only on politicians. Even if you induct a Nitish Kumar minister there, but the point is, if you give him a critical ministry and he's merely there because he needs one cabinet berth, then you're not going to do that. In critical ministries, you need people who understand and who will deliver. I think that is the change you need. And if Mr. Modi cannot do it, no government can do it. I mean, you don't need only politicians who need places in the cabinet. You need to have competent guys. And that's where I think Mr. Modi can actually now take the risk, because there's only a year and a half to go.
So yeah, but you know, I remember speaking with you about this, Mr. Jagannathan, in 2014, when he had absolutely no risk and much more time to go. And clearly that's a path that this government has chosen not to go down. They want to keep ministries with and ministers within the political system, one way or the other. Yeah. But I'm going to ask Mr. Bhattacharya for his list, if there is one. His list of who's going to be shuffled around.
Wrong in 2 days' time. So, and let me be adventurous, and let me say that I'm looking forward to seeing probably a new defense minister and a lot of new faces in the social sector ministries. You know, water resources. Certainly, I think river development and Ganga rejuvenation is need for a new minister. Probably the existing minister has been busy doing something else. You have micro small industries minister Kalraj Mishra, who I'm told is already 76 years old, and going by the earlier definition of age, if that age criterion is still followed, probably Mr. Mishra will be shifted. I would say that the social sector ministries are something that I'm looking forward to. Apart from the key economic, the energy ministry, Minister of State, and if there is some rejigging and streamlining and merging of ministries happen, I will be very excited.
You know, having said that, let's not forget that there are a host of very important assembly elections coming up before 2019. Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Karnataka, Odisha, with the 2019 general elections, and that is something which will definitely be front and center of focus for the government. And for Prime Minister Modi when he is undergoing this exercise. A last word from you, Mr. Chokkalingam. What kind of changes would the market be anticipating or looking at? Is this an event at all for the markets?
Oh, not really, because unless there is any known phase related to the Ministry of Commerce, Industry, which gives some confidence. Then only the market can cherish it. Otherwise, it would be a non-event for the market.
Right. Now, whether it's a non-event or not, the excitement levels are extremely high at this point. We all love a good guessing game, and a lot of that is going on now. We've refrained from that and kept our guesses to ourselves, but we have made an attempt to talk about why this reshuffle is important, and can anything solid actually be achieved by these new ministers in the time that this government has left before 2019. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on this conversation today. And please stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint. We're going to be covering this reshuffle extensively, in depth, and also trying to understand the economic impact of it all.